Hello, welcome everyone to this past marathon, Achieving AI Analytics. We are excited you could join us today for Jeff Renz, Justin Kirkwood, and Gabriel Villa session Alexa or a chatbot. This past marathon features back-to-back live webinars delivered by expert speakers from the past community. The session will be recorded and posted online after the event. You will receive an email letting you know when the recording is available. My name is Carlos Garcia. I am in Tijuana, Mexico, and I'm very happy to be hosting this event. So if you request any technical assistance, please use the pane located on the right side of your screen, and someone will be assisting you. The question pane is also where you may want to ask any questions or comments. Feel free to enter any question at any time. And once we get to the Q&A portion of the session, I will read the questions aloud to the speaker. You are able to zoom in the presentation content by using the zoom button located on the top of the presentation window. And please note, there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session. This will be a pop-up after the webinar ends in your web browser. Your feedback is really important for us for future events, so please take a moment to complete it. And keep learning all year long, please. Visit pass.org and check out all the free educational resources available for PASS members. Connect, share, and learn. And also don't forget that PASS Summit will be happening on November 5th in Seattle, Washington. Head over to passsummit.com and please register today, right now. This past marathon session is presented by Jeff, Justin, and Gabe. I'm going to hand over the reins to them and let them introduce themselves. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'm Jeff Renz. I'm a senior BI architect with RevGen Partners. I have a background in SQL, BI, some data science from when I was earlier in my career, more recently working back to some data science with machine learning, and completed a class as part of my Harvard's business analytics program in a quantitative analysis using R.
My name is Justin Kirkwood. I'm an architect with RevGen Partners. I'm typically working on more like web applications, C#, Angular, but a few of our clients have really been going after these cognitive services. And so I've spent quite a bit of my time digging into chatbots and some of these Alexa skills, and we're excited to show you what we found.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Gabriel Villa, and I am an architect at RevGen. I've been working for the past few years in application development as well as cloud development and implementing data solutions. So I'm very happy to be here.
So what we have for our agenda today is I'd just like to introduce getting going with AI, how we did it at RevGen. Then I will dive into some Azure machine learning models with web services, building a knowledge base with Q&A Maker. Then I'm going to pass the ball over to Justin to show how you can consume services and do some great things with chatbots. And then over to Gabe, who will share Alexa skills. And then time permitting, we'd like to share some of our findings that we had with this experience and then open it up for questions and answers. So when we were thinking about consulting and we want to be on top of latest technologies and emerging trends, we do have an innovation council at RevGen. And what we had done was we put a call out to people in the company to get some crowdsourcing ideas on some stuff we might be interested in, want to work on. So we had a lot of people that joined and contributed. After we got some ideas, we had some basic seed concepts. So a couple AI concepts, some advanced analytics, and some other things. After things were thought through a little bit, things boiled down to 2 maker teams. Both topics were focused on AI. And so we actually wanted to share some of those findings and results at the past marathon. One really great thing about the innovation process that we had was you didn't only have to really be technical to participate. We were doing things outside of normal working hours. We were just excited about learning new things. So we did have project managers to business analysts to people that worked with SQL and C#, and people just interested in data and learning and researching new things that were exciting to them. So a lot of different roles on our teams. And to really make it fun, from the 2 maker teams, we ended up having a showdown at one of our company meetings. And so one selected theme, we were doing a digital customer interaction, where we were leveraging NLP and unstructured data in a chatbot format. The other one was analytics through a virtual assistant, where it was really a lot of focus on the Alexa skills with BI data sources. So that was a showdown. We won't discuss which team had won, but a couple members on this presentation were on the winning team. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the demo where we'll actually create a model in Azure ML Studio, talking through the web services and consuming them. So if we jump into Azure Machine Learning Studio, I'm going to go ahead and predict on a churn model and talk through some of the data that's available and what we really did. So we had a churn CSV file, and if we were to visualize data from it, we're going to see we have a bunch of different variables in here. So we have observations, we have the account length, the state, things that come from area code, phone numbers. You have an international plan, a voicemail plan, messaging, minutes, days, for charges, evening charges, nighttime charges. So one nice thing, you can see how data is distributed. One important thing then, near the end here, is customer service calls. We can see the distribution of those. And then, were you a churner, true or false, if you were the churn or not. You could then choose which columns that you would want to select. So there was some exclusions that we had done. Let me actually come back over to the training experiment. It's the same data, but this is the actual model that we have. So both are going to be the same from that standpoint. We're going to see which columns we have available. We can say what columns we want to exclude. We're excluding some because there's redundant data, highly correlated data. One trick you can do a correlation and look for things being linear. You would then create a 2-class boosted decision tree, where we put 20 for the number of leads, etc., minimum number. We're going to split the data. So if we look at what we have on our split, we're going to do 70-30, where we're going to train with 70, and then we're going to evaluate the model with the other 30. When we come in and train the model, we're going to then score the models that we have, and then we're going to evaluate the models. So if we were to visualize how good the model is, we're going to see that we're okay on some predictions, that we have true positives, false negatives, false positives, true negatives. We have accuracy, precision, and recall. We won't get into the details of what those mean right now. There's a part coming up where we have a knowledge base where we could look up some of those details if we're confused what those values really mean. But that is our predictions. So then the other thing you could do, if you like the results from your model, you could click on here and you could say saved as a trained model. And when you click that button, you will see we have a couple of trained models here. We could go to our predictive experiment part then, and we could select what trained model we want to use. So same imported data, but we're going to actually add a web service input to that. We're going to score the model and have a web service output. When we do that, we could then deploy as a web service, so we could do classic or new. The idea is we're going to create this web service for our chatbots or Alexa to consume, or other ways, other features to do that. Once we have deployed our web service, we're going to see under our web services this churn predictive web service. And so you can see this API key. So this is what Justin and Gabe are going to use to connect to this web service. You could actually test your service out in Excel or through code. If you click on this request response, it'll take you to another web page where you can see some details of what you're doing for your prediction and your values, etc. So if we're going to do a quick test, is this web service really good? We could come into Aws Studio. We want to include a few libraries, but we'll put in our predictions for our inputs inside a list. We're going to pass in our API key right there to connect to our web service, and go ahead and run it, and then we'll print out our results. So if I clear out my results window down here on the lower left-hand side, I'm going to highlight all this code to run. I'm going to get results back. So I'm going to see what did I really pass in. I have account length. Do they have an international plan, voicemail plan, message plan, etc. I get a churn. The customer did not churn, and then I have predictive. They're not going to churn from the results. So my web service call was successful. What would be easier to see is working in Excel. You can download from that website I showed you earlier. You could create sample data by just using use sample data, or you can try to mine some data to find some results. The output will say I'm going to put the cells in A11. I hit my predict. I'm going to have output back. So I'm going to have churn, scored labels. So this is what actually happened. This is what was predicted. And then this was the probability associated to that. So we'll see in some cases we didn't predict correctly with our model. In a lot of cases we did. So the next thing we could talk about is a knowledge base. So I went through a lot of predictive analytics terms, but people might not be sure what those mean. We had some variables associated to our predictions. What were those definitions? So a great tool that we can leverage is Azure Q&A Maker. So if we were to go ahead and look at a few things, there's different formats that Q&A Maker can load data into the knowledge base with. So I like Excel. You can just do a question and then an answer. So we can define what all of our variables are. And then some of our statistics, like what was ROC and what was precision and what's a false positive, we could put that in our knowledge base. So when we come into Azure Q&A Maker, this is the homepage for it. One prerequisite is if you're in the Azure portal, you need to provision it. There's a few things with the pricing tiers that you can look at. Some stuff is free if you have low volumes, a little bit more to like $10 a month if you're paying for it. But it is a prerequisite to configure it. It's pretty easy. You could just search on Q&A and the wizard will walk you through it. So then when you come into Q&A Maker, you could say, I want to create a Q&A knowledge base. You could do it from scratch. I could select different subscriptions that I have. I could say what service am I going to put it on, my Renz Q&A, name my knowledge base, upload my Excel file. And when I do that, I'm going to create and have a bunch of, we call this customer churn, questions and answers. So I can see what is ROC, et cetera. It returns those questions back. When I test this, I could put in F1, hit the answer. So it gives me the formula for it. I could put in FN, so I can see that's a false negative, etc. So again, once you publish this, the great thing is it's exposed as a web service, and we could have our chatbots call that from our web service. So I won't get into all the details of publishing, but it's nice before you publish that you could run the test and get into it that way. So with that, I'd like to give Justin time to be able to go ahead and show how you consume these services from a chatbot.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Wait for the control. There we go. Okay. All right, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Jeff has done a great job of putting together some resources that we want to consume, and going out to the chatbot, to the Q&A maker isn't really a practical way of doing that. So I want to show you a better way of exposing some of those resources and consuming them. So I'm also at the Azure portal, and I'm going to go ahead and start with creating a new resource. And I'll search for the web app chat. Sorry, web app bot. Yeah, if only I could type. My apologies. Web app bot. So I'll go ahead and select this software plan. And as Jeff said, with his Q&A maker, you go through and do some basic configuration, specify a bot name, resource group, how you want to pay, similar to the Q&A maker. You also have the ability to select bot templates. With the SDK 4, which is the .NET Core version of Microsoft's bot framework, you don't have as many templates to select from, so you have an Echo bot and a basic bot. If you select the old .NET framework, you have quite a few more templates to select from. You have your Q&A maker, you have forms, basic, some LUIS, which is Microsoft's cognitive language understanding platform. But for this example, we're going to select the SDK4 and a basic bot. So for savings of time, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the one that we've already created. So go over here and select the Pass Marathon Chat. So you're provided with this blade with quite a few features automatically out of the box. You can go down to application settings, and you'll see that we've already, just by generating that new resource, generated a bunch of different values down here, including LUIS, which is that language understanding component, which actually will take your utterances, so the words that you're saying, and break them apart into intents and entities, so we can start understanding what the user's trying to gain from our platform. And so I can see that this has already been populated. And if I go over here to LUIS, which is just at LUIS.ai, I've already gone ahead and logged in. The LUIS engine has already been generated for our chatbot. We don't have to do anything here. We automatically get several intents, which I can go ahead and open up greeting. So if somebody comes in and says hello, we're going to respond with something. And then we have a couple custom ones that we've added for churn and answer, which will associate with the Q&A maker that Jeff just put together. So I can get into those in a moment. But just strictly right out of the box, and this is no custom code, I can go ahead and say hello. And you see that we're already interacting with LUIS. It's come back and said, what is your name? So I can say, my name is Justin. It's going to break that apart. It understands that we had a greeting, and now it's pulling apart the utterance that I sent and pulled off Justin as the entity, which is the name. I can say I live in Dexter. And boom, now we have, hi Justin from Dexter, nice to meet you. And all of that was already generated automatically with no code required from the end user. But obviously that's not exactly where you want to end. So you can go over to build, and Microsoft actually allows you to do some very basic editing inline through Azure. So I can click onto here, and I can see my entire solution available to me. I can go into my dialogues, and we just saw this greeting dialogue. where we have this object with a name and a state, as well as all the actions and methods that are associated with that. I'm not going to dig too far into that, but just know that if you didn't actually want to pull down the entire source code and do any development inside of Visual Studio, they have a platform on here. But if you do want to pull down the entire code base, just click on download bot source code, and it'll download an archive for you that you can extract and begin working with. So go ahead and open up Visual Studio. So here's the code base that Microsoft provides. It's nice and clean. Like I mentioned, it's all .NET Core. And I'm going to show you how to integrate both the Q&A maker that Jeff put together, as well as the machine learning model that he exposed for us. So we'll start with the Q&A maker. So with these chatbots, they need to understand what engines they're interacting with. Like I mentioned, there's Lewis, which is going to break down your utterances into intents and entities. So we need to make sure that we've associated that. This you all get for free. So it's going to leverage the application settings that you've seen associated on our blade that we just looked at. And I've also added this Q&A endpoint. So from the resource that Jeff put together, he supplied me with a knowledge base ID, an authorization token, a bearer token, as well as an endpoint. And that's really all we need in order to start interacting with his Q&A maker. And then we just add it to our stack of services, and it's ready to go. But now we need to actually understand at what point do we want to interact with the Q&A maker, when are we interacting with their greeting, when are we going to be interacting with the machine learning, and all of that happens inside of this basic bot method. So break it down for you. So sorry as I scroll around. So after every single message that is received into the chatbot, so you saw the greeting that came in, it's broken down into an intent. And we can see right here that we take from the Lewis service, and I can show you over here. Let me fire this up. Let me go ahead and open up this. I'm using the bot framework emulator, which Microsoft provides. It allows me to interact with my bot locally instead of having to redeploy up to the web. So I can just say hello. And we've hit this Lewis results breakpoint. Go ahead and step through that. And we can see this top intent is a greeting. So Lewis has already said, based off of the utterance that it received, that it understands what we're trying to work with. And you can see that once again, we're seeing that exact same interaction we saw before. Where do you live? All right, great. So we used the default code. But now we want to see how do we interact with the Q&A maker. So I can say, throw another breakpoint down here. What is ROC? So you can see that now the intent actually came back as an answer. We're going to leverage that service that we just hooked up. And this is literally all the code that it takes in order to interact with the Q&A maker. We pass it off with the context, which was the question we just supplied, and it's going to come back with our answer, which we'll see here in a moment. Receiver operating characteristic. I can also do what is F1 score. Once again, it figures out that we're dealing with an answer intent, and it provides what the F1 score formula is. So really slick and very little custom code required. Essentially, you just need to add the Q&A service to your bot, as well as do some basic intents on the Lewis side so it understands how to map back to your dialogue breakdown. So that kind of covers the Q&A side. The more interesting side is interacting with the machine learning. So I'll go ahead and show that. So as Jeff showed, he had his Excel spreadsheet that he was using to predict whether a customer would churn or not. I'm going to go ahead and ask, will our customer from Colorado churn if they use 10 international minutes? So just a more natural way of interacting with that machine learning model. So it comes back and it says, because the subscriber does not have an international plan, but only use 10 international minutes, it is projected they will not churn. All right. So if I go ahead and just use that same question, but I go ahead and up that to, let's say they spoke for 1,050 minutes and their bill is going to be gigantic. I can go ahead and fire that off, and it says, because the subscriber does not have an international plan and use 10,000 or 1,050 minutes, they are projected to churn. So you can see how it's much more consumable than looking at an Excel spreadsheet if you wanted to interact with it in this fashion. And as far as how we integrated with that, once again, we're going through that exact same Lewis engine, which is breaking down our utterance into an intent, which is associated as to the churn intent, as well as there's a couple entity objects that are on there. So the user location, the Colorado component, as well as those international minutes. And that's passed into this block of code. And what's really nice is that the majority of this code was written by that machine learning process that Jeff has shown. It generates a large chunk of code that you can just kind of drop into your existing solution and just manipulate a little bit in order to make it applicable to your situation. So I'm just checking to see whether or not it's setting the churn as true or false, and then based off of that, responding. So obviously, depending on the complexity and the various scenarios that you might be working through, you would have to add additional verbiage. But for this example, we just wanted to show how we would toggle based off of the results from that predictive model. So, but that covers what I wanted to show on the chatbot side. So I'm going to pass it over to Gabe.
All right. Thank you, guys. And please let me know if you can see my screen.
Ken.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, now we're thinking about in the Amazon side of things, can we integrate and still leverage machine learning that's either in the Amazon side or even in the Azure side? And basically, this quick demonstration I have will be able to show you how to leverage a device, much like the Echo Dot, and create an Alexa skill and integrate that in the AWS cloud to point to the machine learning model that Jeff has built. So just at a high level, what you'll see here is this is really the level of basically the high level architecture of how this works. I have with me today an Echo Dot, and much like utilizing a Fire Stick or the Echo or any of the Amazon devices, you'll be able to speak to it and talk to your data, but this time your data will be able to talk back to you. So the user talks to the device goes through what is called an Alexa voice, an Alexa skill, which is really an application that enables you to use the skills to either, just like an application, interact with web services, data, or anything what have you. And then from the Alexa skill, it starts hitting a web service. The web service that we're using right now is on AWS Lambda. And the AWS Lambda, what it is your serverless technology that allows you to deploy code. In the background, it's really a virtual machine that has a runtime engine that you would need to run the type of code. For the purpose of this demo, we are using C#. You can build you can build your AWS function to either leverage Python, Java. It's a multiple runtime engines that it can actually leverage. But for the sake of this demonstration, we'll be using some C#. So let's kind of go over a few of the things. Right, guys. I don't know, how do I get rid of this webcam stuff? And I kind of want to start off first with the AWS Lambda part. I mean, sorry, the Alexa skill part. So, like I said, the Alexa skill is really the application that you build that's going to be the very first point of contact between you and your data or your machine learning model. So the Alexa skill really is broken down to several pieces. You have utterances, slots, and intents. What you see here is you actually have intents, much like what Justin was showing. The intent is going to be the action that is being triggered, and the utterance is really the phrase that you would use to map it into a particular intent. For instance, how are my customers could be one particular utterance. And then, of course, you have your slots. And your slots really, they represent a value. So think about it as a dynamic variable. So in this particular case, we're going to be connecting to the same churn model, predictive model, and we want to be able to get some information based on a customer. So I'll be using a customer name, and that could be dynamic, and that customer name will be a slot, and Alexa will actually interpret that into a particular value and implement the actual value into the code when you need to. Then from here, and I got to show you, I guess, really quick how this actually interacts. As you can see, inside your actual Alexa skill, you would actually give it the endpoint of where you want to connect to. So because I'm using AWS Lambda, I can use the AWS resource name, the ARN, to point to an actual function that I already have deployed on AWS. You could also use any other type of endpoint, so it doesn't necessarily have to be all AWS driven. But if it is an Alexa device or an AWS device, you would go through the Alexa developer console, which you see here, to be able to go that route. Again, the intents, basically you would create all the various utterances to every intent. You would actually build that model. Building the model successfully gives the application basically the ability for it to be compiled and ready to use. And so from that point, a couple other things just for setup. In AWS, I do have a database running on RDS, and that particular database is really just data, that sample data that we'll be utilizing to be able to connect to from the device. And this is the same data that you've been looking through with Justin and Jeff, and we'll be utilizing this to eventually interact with the data and pass it through the churn model. And then, of course, Lambda is the other component in AWS, your serverless technology. As I mentioned, you can have a choice of various runtimes that you can go with, including Node, Java, Python, and so on. But we're going to be using, like I mentioned, C# in Visual Studio. And what's interesting about this is you would have probably not guessed, but Visual Studio is equipped with the AWS SDK. And so we're leveraging this Visual Studio and AWS to develop and deploy the Lambda function. And if we were to start this from scratch, and then you have installed the actual component or SDK, you'll see here that you actually have an option to start a Lambda function, project in Visual Studio. So that is what we did to create this Lambda function. We did start by creating a project in there, but the important piece here is the actual components that we're using. So like Justin mentioned, a lot of the code that was provided to us from the machine learning side is basically kind of plug and play with some minimal modifications. However, AWS Lambda runs the .NET Core framework, so it's a little bit more slimmed down than the full .NET version. So there's library changes that you would have to do. You would do a little bit more tweaking to make this work successfully. But the most important library that you'll need, obviously, will be the Alexa.NET package, and that you can actually install with either NuGet, or just bring it in through the .NET CLI or package CLI. And then, of course, the functions, the intents are really what I kind of separated the actual code to basically correlate with the intents that we have on the Alexa skill set. So some of the few things that are very important to understand, when Alexa goes through the device, it's going to bring the actual object as an intent, and you have to identify what intent are you working with. So back in our Lambda, in our AWS console, we have several intents. So if you were to be working with one particular intent, for instance, do we have any new customers? We label that in enum, actually, so that the function knows which class we actually want to work with. And in this particular case, we have a class that's named new customers, the equivalent to what that is. And this is where you start building out the interaction with either the database or the response that you will get, right? So in this particular case, we are going into a class called get new customer intent. And that particular class also dives into another function that will actually do the interaction with the database, right? So if I were to start our Alexa device, and I would say something like, well, first you have to invoke it, and the invocation in this particular case is pass demo. So if I were to do something like, Alexa, open pass demo.
Hello, Gabe and past marathon attendees. How may I be of assistance today?
Do we have any new customers?
Your newest customer is Laverne, added on Wednesday, March 20th, 2019.
Right, so now that you can see, oops, I should have muted it there.
I don't know how to handle this intent. Please say something like, Alexa, ask past demo about my customers.
All right, now that I muted it. So now you can see the actual interaction in the data that we have around here. It said that Laverne was our newest customer. And if you kind of see the database the way we're seeing it here, as we do have Laverne that was added on 3/20, which was yesterday's date. Everyone else was added in December. So what we did in our actual code is we had that interaction, from the Alexa skill set to the Lambda function, and I actually went in and I queried that information, get newest customer. So I have a C# expression here using an account model that I use, a data model. The class of the new account goes out to the database, comes back, and it says, what it just did. And to kind of prove that this is dynamic, let's try a different intent. Alexa, open past demo.
Hello, Gabe and past marathon attendees. How may I be of assistance today?
Who has been with my service the longest?
Your loyal customer is Mo, with 210 days with us.
So it seems like Mo has 210 days. So you can see that it went out there, and it similarly to the new account, it went and reached out for Mo. But what if we got rid of Mo and we try this once more, and we actually try to see if it dynamically comes back and says, hey, Mo's no longer your oldest customer. Alexa, open past demo.
Hello, Gabe and past marathon attendees. How may I be of assistance today?
Who is my oldest customer?
Your loyal customer is Jack, with 161 days with us.
So now Jack, you can see dynamically our data set has changed, and it comes back and it does say that, hey, Jack is your most loyal customer because he's been there for 161 days. And you can see the interaction that you have in there. And so the last bit that I kind of want to demonstrate, if this is just getting that customer data through the Alexa, but we want to actually get into the predictive churn, right? Can we predict? So similarly, we're going to be using the same skill set. It's going to go out there. I'm going to tell it. We'll use Jack as an example. If Jack will churn, and this is comes back with Jack's information. We break it down and put into the actual values that need to be passed into the model. And we have the same API key, the same endpoint that we're using, and then it should come back with an object of whether or not that's going to churn for Jack. And so let's see what the destiny holds for him, right? Alexa, open pass demo.
Hello, Gabe and past marathon attendees. How may I be of assistance today?
Will Jack drop our service?
Your customer, Jack, will churn with a probability of 0.991467535495758.
So I could have rounded that number, right?
I don't know how to handle this intent.
Very precise.
Say something like Alexa, ask past demo about my customers.
Correct. Yeah, we have it pretty precise. But yeah, so in the actual intent for the churn, we get the churn results, right? And we have a probability in here, which we could have rounded up, right? I mean, rounded down, or turned into a percentage. So you can see the skill set itself. When it comes to the application side of things and how you're going to code this, it takes a little bit of time to kind of get down to those details and make it seem more, realistic, right? But I think that's really what I wanted to demonstrate, is the interaction of an Alexa skill over to being able to communicate and work dynamically with your database. A few things to kind of notice. When it goes out to the database, it did at time to time have a little bit of latency. So there's ways to bypass that by maybe including working with Memcache or Redis to kind of preload that data, or have some lazy loading in there that will make the actual querying a lot quicker where you're using in-memory data as opposed to going back and forth to a SQL database. But yeah, that's all I had to demonstrate here at this case. I think I'll turn it back to Justin. Right, Justin?
Thank you, Gabe. Go ahead and so that kind of concludes the demo portion of our talk. But some of the findings that we found across this development and what we've done with RevGen innovation, we wanted to share with the group. Specifically, kind of where chatbots thrive. And for us, we've really seen that they thrive in more business settings, particularly like call centers, human resource, a lot of those simplistic requests and tasks that people don't necessarily need to be involved with. And a lot of the chatbots, especially Microsoft solutions, there's a ton of channels that they are ready to be deployed upon. So you can write your single chatbot and just hook it up to as many as 20 different channels that are supported out of the box, including Slack, Microsoft Teams, Skype, Facebook Messenger. And then as far as where Alexa thrives, it's a lot of the home automation, shopping lists, media consumption, entertainment. And so wherever you're going to have that more of just a natural actual conversation verbally, that's where you're going to see Alexa really shine. So as far as things that were easy, that initial setup, both Alexa and the Amazon AWS and Microsoft have some really great templates that they hand off to you when you create those resources. So it's really easy to get up and running, and there are some frustrating things and kind of tedious as far as, setting up your intents, understanding all the different ways that your customer is going to be interacting with you, and trying to find those slight variations. And as your application grows and your AI grows smarter and learns from those interactions, those kind of go away and are, smooths out. But during that initial setup, that can be a little tedious to deal with. What's cool is the fact that you can leverage all of these cognitive services that Microsoft and Amazon and others have made available. Microsoft has 15 or 16 different cognitive services that you can leverage, with facial recognition and understanding what's in a picture. All of those can be tied into these different services, similar to how we just tied in the Q&A maker and the machine learning model. They're just simple web endpoints that you just hook in and you're ready to roll. Let's see, and the customizations, there's adaptivecards.io. That's a really slick website that Microsoft provides. It allows you to create little cards that you can respond to web chat channels with, including pictures, interactive forms, buttons. So not only do you have to have that just text conversation, you can actually have something that the user can interact with and click with. And then let's see, and similar, like while the Alexa and the chatbot have their different areas that they really thrive in, that backend process is really similar. We saw that on the Alexa side you have your intents, and on the Microsoft side you have your intents and your utterances and how they're breaking it down, even down to how Gabe put his solution together on the Alexa stack on the Lambda. Those dialogues and interactions are really similar to how we have architected it on the Microsoft side. We were able to leverage a lot of the same code base, and even though they're going to different channels, if you kind of learn one, both sides. They just hook up a little bit differently. And then troubleshooting, there's a big community out there that's already solved a lot of the things that we're looking at and trying to do. So it was a much simpler process to get after than I initially thought, and we've been really pleased with our results. Is there anything else that you gentlemen wanted to add?
I just wanted to throw in there that we had a lot of participation in the company, again, with the people that wanted to learn some simple C# that hadn't done some C# before to pitch in on the project. Thinking through what you could do with AI, a lot of good ideas out there. So it was definitely a really fun project that we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, and the same on the Alexa scale side, right? There was a lot of people who just dove into that for the very first time. A little bit complicated at first, but then it started to make sense. The more people involved or the more people that participate, the more detailed you can get in with the utterances and your intents that you're actually trying to accomplish with your AI.
But I'd also throw out there the Q&A maker was surprisingly easy to use. We were planning a lot of time required to get our knowledge base up, and Mick, one of the people on our team, was like, I got it, loaded the whole thing, it's working. I was like, well, okay, wow, that was surprising. Very easy to use.
Yeah. I think we're ready if we want to answer any questions.
Yeah, this is very good stuff. And speaking of Q&A, so there are a couple of questions from Hiram. The first one, he is asking, what about handoff to human?
Sure. While there are solutions out there, I can't claim that I've worked with that. It would be a similar pattern as to, let's see if you guys can still see my screen.
Yes.
So as we're interacting with these different dialogues and these different intents, you could get to a point where the person that you're interacting with no longer wants to speak with you. The equivalent of hitting 000 or dialing representative. And so at that point you could break out of that and switch that conversation to another channel. So while it would still be leveraging a lot of this bot piece, can think of this as an open channel that we would be making in between the human and our call center, whatever chat method they have internally. We just start passing that communication through there and kind of bypassing the stuff that you see here.
Nice. Okay, and there's another question also from him. Can you incorporate similar intent decision with Lewis on an SDK v3 example Q&A bot template?
So I don't know if I understood that question. What was the middle part of that?
The question is, can you incorporate similar intent decision with Lewis on an SDK v3, like version 3?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, the v3, the .NET framework, it supports all the same functionality that you saw today. So you do not need to be going down the .NET Core route. v3 also supports that. And it supports multiple Q&A makers in the same chatbot. So there's a few examples, tutorials that Microsoft has put together that show you how to associate multiple Q&A makers. You can see here that when I'm passing the context, I'm also passing in a name of the Q&A maker. So if we had a variety, so if we had the machine learning Q&A maker, and we also had something that was like human resources related, we could just specify which Q&A engine that we wanted to target.
Thank you. Well, we have a couple of minutes more for any other question. If any attendee has any other question, or you guys, speakers, if think something was missed, or can we include a final comment here?
Actually, you know what? Would you mind flipping the control back over to my screen really fast? See my screen. Do you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
So we were talking about Lewis. This is something that Justin and I did for a demo. So I can put in, these were with the Lewis intents. And so let's see, like, what is my bill? So this is an example using the cards that we talked about, which was really cool. You could do a lot of customization to show additional things. So again, a little bit more customization inside of this. Justin, I don't know if you want to speak to this a bit more on the effort, but I felt like it was pretty easy banging this out pretty quickly.
Sure. I mean, literally, you can go to that Adaptive IO website, Adaptive Cards IO, and configure your card on that site. They essentially just generate some JSON schema for you to pull down into your code, and then just kind of bind those properties to. And they have dozens of examples, and so I was able to leverage those. I am not a UI expert by any stretch of the imagination, so it's always nice when somebody else has already done the hard work, and I just have to bind my properties to it. So if you find yourself looking for a better user experience, and you don't want to spend the time figuring out how those adaptive cards work, just go out to that website, and I'm sure you'll be able to find something that's appropriate for your scenario.
And there is one last question here. And the question is, I might have missed it, but did Alexa skill consume the same KB as the web app bot Justin showed? Or was the Alexa skill trained manually per intent variable instead of pointing into an FAQ?
No, so we weren't pointing to we were not doing any kind of Q&A from the Alexa side. It was really just working directly or integrating directly with a database on RDS. What it was hitting was the machine learning model that Jeff did hit. I mean, that he created. So that's basically just getting the data from the database and passing in the parameters that it needed to pass to get the churn result.
But that's not to say that we couldn't have, right? I mean, it's just another endpoint that we're interacting with, and all the Q&A maker does is take that full utterance. So even though Lewis does disseminate the what the user says, in the Q&A example, we're actually just passing that full verbiage onto the Q&A maker for it to break down and associate with that answer. So it's almost a pass-through when we're working with the Q&A maker.
Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. And yeah, it looks like we don't have any more questions so far, but anyone can feel free to send questions by email. Yeah, what about you guys? No more questions here.
Great. I guess,
Awesome.
thank you.
Well, I appreciate everybody that attended, and hopefully this was useful.
Yep, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Stay tuned for our next session, sentiment analysis using cognitive services in Power BI with Indra Vandari. And of course, thank you all for attending and stay tuned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Carlos. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.